What's up, guys? GMoney here with this crazy bullhead I got in my house. Back for another PLO vlog. I appreciate everyone who's been liking and subscribing to these videos. I hit 1,000 subscribers, so now YouTube's paying me ad revenue. I made my first $1. That's a win. Hope you enjoy these hands. Without further ado, let's get right into the session. I get to the lodge around 10 a.m. This game ran overnight and stacks are deep. There's also been a $20 or $40 straddle on in almost every hand I've seen so far. For that reason, I buy in for 3,300. I'm expecting a high stakes game today, and I'm excited for it. In this first hand of note, I look down at ace, ace, jack 3 double suited in the $10 straddle. There's a $20 straddle on. Middle position, hijack, small blind, and big blind limp. Definitely want to raise double suited aces, so I pot it to 140. Middle position, hijack, and small blind make the call. We're headed 4 ways to a flop that comes down 9, 4, 3, 2 diamonds, 1 club. It checks to me, and I only have an over pair of aces. I do have a pair of 3s, which gives me backdoor full house potential, but not having the flush draws, definitely going to have to check here. So I check. Middle position now pots it to 600. It folds back to me, and I'm not going to be able to do anything here, so I make the fold. But I'm excited for a high stakes game, and we got some crazy hands here, and let's head to the next one. In the next hand of note, I look down at ace, king, jack 3 with king high spades in a bomb pot. I'm on the button. The top board comes 7, 5, 2 with 2 diamonds. Not much for me there, but the bottom board comes ace, ace, queen with 2 hearts. Under the gun leads for $100. The hijack makes the call, and given that I don't have a boat on the bottom board, and I have weak equity on the top board, I just call. We're headed 3 ways to a turn, which comes great. The bottom board is the ace of clubs, so I have quads. Let's go. Can't lose that board. The top board comes a 3 of clubs, so still not much for me there. Under the gun now checks, and the hijack bets 300. I could raise here, but given that I'm likely drawing dead on the top board, I want to call and invite the under the gun player into the pot, so when it chops, I can chop up his money. Also, I have intentions of going big on the river to try and fold my opponents off their hands, given that I have the nuts on the bottom board. So I make the call, and under the gun now folds. We're headed heads up to the river, which comes the 2 of spades on the bottom and the jack of spades on the top. Under the gun now leads for pot, and given that I can't lose the bottom board, I want to apply pressure, but given that he potted it, I don't think I have much fold equity here. I go all in anyways. He calls, and he shows jack 8, 6, 4 for the nut straight on the bottom board. We're going to chop this one and take down a small profit with the antes and the $100 that the under the gun player bet, and we're on to the next hand. In the next interesting hand, I look down at ace, ace, king 8 with ace high clubs in the hijack. There's a $10 straddle on, and it folds to me. I open it to 35. The cutoff, small blind, and straddle make the call. We're headed 4 ways to a flop, which comes down jack, king, 4 with 2 diamonds. Not much for me here, so when it checks to me, I check as well, and it checks around. We're headed to the turn, which comes the ace of spades, giving me top set. The small blind leads for $100, and I don't think raising is appropriate here, because he could have queen 10 for the straight. He could also have worse hands that he wants to bet for value. So I just make the call, and we're headed to the river, which comes the 4 of spades. I now have aces full. Let's go. He checks to me, and I'm definitely going to bet for value. I throw in 250. He folds. We're going to take down a nice profit, and we're on to the next hand. In the next hand of note, I look down at ace, ace, 8, 5 on the button with ace high diamonds. There's a $10 straddle and 4 limpers to me. I pot it to 75. Now 5 players make the call, and we're headed 6 ways to a flop that comes 10, 7, 3 rainbow. Not much for my hand here. It checks to the hijack, who pots it to 460. I'm going to have to fold. One player ends up making the call. They run it twice and end up chopping. Let's head to the next hand, where hopefully we can hit the flop. Alright, more 4 card action in this hand. I look down at ace, king, king 10 with 3 hearts in my hand. I'm in the low jack. There's a $10 straddle and 2 limpers before I pot it to 55. Hijack, button, big blind, straddle, under the gun, and middle position call. So we're headed 7 ways to a flop this time, which comes down Jack 2 6 with 2 spades. It checks to me, and again, I'm not going to be able to bet into 6 opponents here, so I'm going to check as well, and it checks around. The turn now comes the 4 of clubs, so I still have nothing besides a pair of kings. My opponents could easily have 2 pair or set type hands, so when it checks to me, I check again. It checks to the button, who bets 200. Only the under the gun player calls. I fold. The river comes the ace of clubs. It goes check, check. The button takes it down with jack 4. And we're going to head to the next hand. We're getting dealt monsters. We just got to start hitting flops. And we're going to start raking pots. Let's go. After whiffing all those flops, I'm now down about $1,200. But that's fine. Stakes in this game are high with the $10 and $20 straddles. Let's try to run it up in these next hands. I now look down at ace king 6-4 with ace high clubs in the hijack. There's a $10 straddle. Folds to me, and I open it to 35. This hand's not the best to open, but here we are. 5 opponents call this bet, and we're headed 6 ways to a flop, which comes excellent. Ace, ace 6, rainbow. I flop the nuts. Top boat. It's not immune to being drawn out on. Any card over a 6 that's not a king would be potentially bad for our hand because opponents can make better full houses. The straddle now leads for $100. It's on me, and I have a decision here. I could call to slow play, or I could raise right now, which I think is the better option given that my hand is not immune to future streets. So I raised to 300. It folds back to the opponent, and he calls. We're headed heads up to the turn, which comes the queen of spades. Bit of a tricky card, because I no longer have the nuts, and he now leads for $500. I really have to decide now if I'm going to go all in with this hand, or fold. The opponent has 825 behind, and I decide, if he has ace-queen, he's got it. So I go all in. The opponent now calls, and we're headed to 2 runouts. The first river comes the 5 of clubs, and the second river comes the jack of clubs. I say I have ace 6 and show my hand. He looks at his hand a bit, and he mucks. So I'm going to take down about a $3,500 pot here. After being stuck $1,300, I'm now up about $300. Let's go. Time for a stack update. Now up to around 4650, and looking to run it up. Can we hit another sun run? Let's see in these next hands. This next hand is one of the most interesting and instructive that I've ever played. I looked down at ace, ace, queen 8, rainbow, in a bomb pot. I looked down to flops of ace, deuce, 6, with 2 clubs on the top, and ace, 10, 3, with 2 hearts on the bottom. And I mean, does it get better than flopping top set aces on both boards? Anyways, the small blind checks to me, and I definitely could lead here. But given that there's 6 other players behind me that could bet, I think check raising is going to be the best option here. If I were to pot it now, I could put 120 in the middle. But if someone else bets pot, I can bet 480. So I looked on a check here. And for the first bomb pot I've seen in maybe 3 weeks, everyone else checks it back. We're now headed to turns, which comes the 5 of hearts on the top and the 8 of spades on the bottom. Definitely not checking anymore. It checks to me, and I bet pot. The player to my left now repots for 480. I love to see it. It folds around to the button, who goes all in for less. He only has 200. And then it folds back to me. I repotted here because I still have the nuts on the bottom and draws to full houses on both boards. Extremely strong hand here. And kind of a weird spot now because the dealer actually gets the pot size wrong and makes it 1160. I didn't realize this in the moment, but the pot size bet should be 1760. So I bet the 1160, and the player on my left calls. The river now comes the jack of hearts on the top, and the 5 of spades on the bottom. I now have a decision, because the flush gets in on the top, and a straight with 2 4s now possible on the bottom. My opponent raised the turn, and he was kind of repping the straight, or the heart draw on both boards. So I feel like I'm only winning half the pot at best. For this reason, I decided to check. It's on him, and he tanks before going all in for his last $2,300. And I'm in the blender here. I feel like I'm calling to chop, but there's only one hand that beats me on the bottom, being 2-4. He could have a hand like 3-4 on the top and also have a 2, so he has a straight, which now makes the nuts on the bottom board. I also think about the math. There's a side pot, which if I chop, I win about 900, and then the smaller main pot. The odds I'm getting are 2,300 to win about 900, so I have to be right a lot of the time here, at least 70% of the time, to break even on this call. After thinking through the math, I ultimately decided I had to lay it down, and the opponent chose 9-8-4-3 with only one heart in his hand. So he didn't have the flush, and he only had the nut straight on the top board, and he has 2 pair on the bottom board. So I made the incorrect fold here. After thinking through this hand for about a week, I've come to the conclusion that the best play was for myself to go all in on the river. It actually changes the math, because if I'm betting 2,300 into him to win 1,800 in the side pot and potentially half the main pot, which is harder to win against 2 opponents, I'm getting way better odds. It's almost like one of those old Western movies where 2 guys are standing across from each other in a duel and they pull their pistol and whoever shoots first wins. I had the opportunity to shoot first in this instance, but I didn't pull my gun. I just stood there and got shot. And I think this is super instructive. I watched an opponent who's a pro in a later hand make a similar play after the board changed on the river by going all in to try and bet the opponent off the chop. I'm definitely going to add this move to my arsenal and learn from this hand. It's just a missed opportunity at this point, and let's see what happens in this next hand. In this next hand of note, I look down at ace 7-5-3 with ace high hearts in the $10 straddle. It folds to the hijack, who's a strong pro, and opens to 35. The cutoff, small blind, and big blind call. I call as well. We're headed 5 ways to a flop, which comes 10, jack, 8 with 2 hearts. I flop the nut flush draw, but not much else. It checks to me, and I check as well, and it checks around. The turn now comes the 9 of hearts. So I improved to the nut flush, but there's 3 straight flushes that are possible: 6-7, 7 jack, and jack queen of hearts. For that reason, after the small blind bets 100, I decided to just call. I want to look for a river that doesn't pair the board, so I still have the nut flush, and I think my hand will function better as a bluff catcher in this spot. After I call, the hijack and the cutoff call as well. We head to the river, which comes the 4 of diamonds. The small blind now checks, and I want to continue with the plan of bluff catching. I think my opponents could feel comfortable betting a lower flush, and I could call. It also protects me if my opponents do have a straight flush. I'll lose the minimum, so I check. The hijack, who's the strong pro, now bets 500. It folds back to me, and I think about it for a little bit. This guy's pretty good. He definitely knows that straight flushes are possible, but I've underrepresented my hand, and I think folding an ace-high flush on an unpaired board is just going to be negative EV. So I stick in the call, and sure enough, he has 6-7 hearts, so I'm going to lose this one. Definitely a cooler. I don't really see how I could have played it differently to lose less, but it happens, and we're on to the next hand. The stack's taking a hit after those last couple of hands, down to around 3,000 again, hoping for some run good and looking to run it up. In the next hand of note, I look down at ace jack jack 3 with 3 clubs in my hand in the $10 straddle. There's a $40 straddle on in this hand. It folds around to the big blind who calls. I pot it to 185. I looked this up in the solver, and it's close between a call and a raise, but I raised, so here we are. The $40 straddle and big blind call. We're headed 4 ways to a flop. It comes jack 9-2, all hearts. The big blind checks dark, and I look at these opponents' stacks, and they all have less than a pot-sized bet left. I want to learn from the hand where I should have just went all in when I had the chance, and just go all in. I think I have fold equity against lower flushes, And considering I have top set, I have odds to make a full house with less than a pot size bet. So I'm not getting the money in bad. If we were deeper stack, it's more of a decision. So I go all in. All opponents fold, and the big blind shows the king of hearts, says he has the flush, and that he believed me. So I finally hit a flop, and I'm going to take down about a $550 profit, and we're on to the next one. In this next hand, I look down at ace, king, king, 6 with king high clubs in the $10 straddle. The $40 straddle's on again. It folds all the way around to me, and I call the 40. The $20 straddle calls, and the $40 straddle checks. We're headed to a flop, which comes ace, king, 2 with 2 hearts. I decide to spring the trap and check. The $20 straddler now bets $50. It folds to me, and I call. The turn now comes at 3 of clubs. I still have a very strong hand, and I block top set. I lose to aces or 4-5, but I'm not too afraid of that at this point. After I check, my opponent bets $100. I want to get more money in the pot. He has about $800 left, so I pot it to $525. He folds, and he says, "It's only because I don't want to lose my whole stack before I leave. So hey, I'll take the money," and we're on to the next one. The stack's now sitting around 3,900. I'm in for 5,300. Can I sunrun and book a win? Let's see. In this next hand, I look down at ace, queen, jack 9 with ace high diamonds on the button. There's a $10 straddle, under the gun, and the low jack limp. Definitely want to raise with 3 Broadway cards and a suited ace. So I pot it to 55. Small blind, big blind, and the straddle call. Under the gun, now limp re-raises 340. This is a strong play. It folds to me, and I'm in position with a strong hand. And if there's anything I've learned from working with the solver, is you don't want to fold to many 3-bets with this kind of hand. So I make the call. The small blind now goes all in for 530. Under the gun and myself call because this bet doesn't reopen the pot. Looking at a good flop here, and the flop comes king, 6, 3, rainbow. All I have is a backdoor flush draw. Under the gun now jams for 1450. It really looks like he has aces here, and this isn't the flop I was looking for. Anything with 2 diamonds, a 10, 2 pair, trips, anything like that I could continue on, but this isn't it. So I make the fold. I looked it up in the solver afterwards, and it likes the call. If it was double suited, I could even re-raise here. But anyways, the opponents run it twice, and the big stack did have aces. The short stack had 8, 7, 5, 4, so he flopped a monster wrap after being all in pre-flop. They end up chopping it up. Not the outcome I wanted, but that's poker sometimes. Hope you guys enjoyed that session. Interesting hands today. I learned a lot. I booked my first loss on the vlog. I lost $2,200 today. I'm going to show some graphs of how I've been doing recently. It's been pretty good, so I was expecting some run bet at some point. It happens. See you back in the next vlog.